Thank you for tuning in to The Political Soup, where you hear editorial about the issues of the day and political philosophy. Your hosts are Nick Alex, our progressive, Dana and Pugh, our conservative, Paul Laws, our classical liberal, and here is our moderator and your host, John Toll.
Hello again, and welcome back to the Political Soup podcast. My name is John Toll, and I'm the moderator. And the real meat and potatoes of the show are the other guys you see down here. We have Dana, Nick, and Paul. And I'm sure you're going to figure out which side they're on here just momentarily if you haven't joined us in the past. If you have, then you know exactly where they stand. So today's topic is the free market's true meaning of Thanksgiving. Now, we don't have an article to follow this one. This is really going to be kind of a free-form show. We'll just see where it goes. So let me see. The first face I see that selected this topic is actually Nick. So
No.
Yep, you get the first shot.
I said not choose me first. I said it's got to go to Paul.
All right. We'll let Paul do it. Go ahead, Paul. Give it a shot.
Paul?
It's all you, man. Yeah, it's in your lap.
I don't know. I guess one of my my complaints has always been, when they taught in school the whole meaning of Christmas and the whole idea. They actually taught it as a deal where the Europeans came over and they had problems doing so much stuff, and they couldn't fend for themselves, and so the Indians taught them how to do it, and the Native Americans taught them how to do it, and that's true, but they always stop there. There's really more to the story, and the more to the story being that the Great Thanksgiving Feast was not really about the idea of the harvest that the Native Americans helped them produce. The Thanksgiving Feast was actually more about the idea that the next part of the story, which is of course that they when the Pilgrims came over, they initially put everything in one store, and they essentially had socialism, and they figured out people died, it didn't work, and the next year they figured out, okay, hey, this isn't working, so essentially they set in place ownership or free markets, and at that point people started producing, and things started working better, and people stopped dying of starvation. That's my always been my chief complaint about the Thanksgiving story. They just don't tell that second part, and that second part does exist.
All right, and you started this off by saying the true meaning of Christmas. You meant the true meaning of Thanksgiving, right? I'm just to clarify that.
Yes.
Okay, all right. You know what? I'm actually going to go to Dana and get your take on this, and then we'll go to Nick last, and you can throw in your side.
Excuse me. Pretty much what Paul said. That they were thanking God, not necessarily thanking the Indians and the Native Americans. But there's also I guess to fit in with the topic of the show, there is a lesson in the free markets in there in terms of individualism versus the community, and that often gets lost. I think that as America is moving a little more towards socialism nowadays, not a little more, but a lot more, more and more every day towards socialism nowadays, I think that's a story that gets overlooked. That even in the very early days of the Pilgrims, that a lot of this had been tried, and that we had an experience with that, and that gave great evidence that individualism is what produces prosperity.
Okay, so you're saying essentially that individualism benefits the local society more than the society trying to consider itself, I guess, is a strange.
Yeah, more than, let's say, a social contract.
Okay.
In a sense.
All right. And Nick?
I guess my point would always be that purity never seems to produce the right outcome. That free markets are great. I won't sit here and pretend that free markets don't have a ton of benefit to them, but unbridled free markets ultimately destroy the communities around them, because a free market does one thing: it serves itself. And it may temporarily provide benefits to communities, but at the end of the day, it creates inequity, and the inequity will ultimately destroy those communities. So, it's to me, when we start talking about free markets, you have to find the right balance. And Paul's story about what originally had started as a trade of ideas between the Native Americans and the Pilgrims, and ultimately the second half of the story, which he rightly points out doesn't get told as much as the rest of as the early part of the Thanksgiving story, but just how the markets ended up creating prosperity and moving things into as you move forward in time. Let's get into the Industrial Revolution and whatnot. Clearly, that kind of market system provided a forward look for our society. But then you start to realize that as those markets serve themselves, as we started to produce things, and you started to hear more and more stories, or get more and more facts of companies taking their waste and dumping them into rivers, and all of a sudden you start to see the environmental impact of a unbridled industry, of a true free market. That is the stuff that ultimately, you can shake your head, but that's the stuff that ultimately needs to be regulated. There is always going to be a requirement of regulation when you have a free market. If you have a true free market, it will only serve itself.
And guys,
That's not a free market.
Let me throw in, Paul, just before you rebut, and I do want to hear what you have to say to that. But as an example, the Industrial Revolution, if you look back, that's an area where everybody started burning as much wood as they could to get the factories rolling. There was no real consideration of the local community, things like that. I mean, that might be an example that we could use for Nick's point. But go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry.
Well, I understand Nick's point. However, we haven't seen free markets in this country for a lot of years. And I mean, what we see today is the unemployment and the like has a direct correlation to the fact that we haven't seen free markets in this country in a long time. I mean, free markets do good things. They do very good things. Sure. And honestly, they're based on mutual mutual agreements between two people. They're based on a mutual agreement that each person will receive something that they want. This is a beneficial thing. I mean, they're not based on, I'm going to cheat you, because the fact is, if somebody cheats you, you don't go back there, and they go out of business.
Assuming that there's another source of what you want.
With a free market, there is.
No, because then you totally ignore that there are barriers to entry. And even in the free market system, there are barriers to entry into any kind of industry, especially in industries that aren't commoditized.
Like regulations.
I'm sorry?
Well,
like regulations are barriers to entry.
Yes, regulation can be a barrier to entry. You won't. Yeah, but again, you go back to the simple, fundamental thought process that if I'm a corporation, what is my number one goal? The number one goal of a corporation is to create value for my shareholder, and it's not necessarily that the value of the shareholder is going to be aligned with all the stakeholders in the transaction a company can take. if I'm producing something that creates a lot of waste, and I can find a way that find a way to dispose of that waste at very low cost, regardless of the environmental impact, then that's clearly going to be what I choose to do if I have nothing forcing my hand to make sure that I dispose of that waste in a way that's more appropriate for the environment. Because it's not about that stakeholder; it's about the shareholder.
You mean nothing forcing your hand, like maybe free markets?
Yeah, I'm wondering what does force their hand now to be environmentally responsible?
You have an EPA that requires them to be responsible. You have a Clean Water Act.
And why does the EPA require that? I mean, on what authority? What's the motivation?
To protect the community.
But that comes from the people, right? I mean, that's what I'm getting at. That the people, I'm assuming that the thought process is the people have an interest in clean water, elect officials who share that interest, who create the EPA and promote all that, right? Or is it just a dictate being handed down by a few people?
No, I mean, it's clearly the government taking its cues from the people. Yes, absolutely.
Right. So why would that not translate to the free market? If people have a vested interest in clean air and clean water, why would they not then take their business elsewhere when a business violates that trust?
Why don't you show me where in the world do you see an actual free market actually address those issues? There is no example of it. So you're not going to find that example. But you can see a government providing regulation to keep water clean, to keep pollution out of the ground.
Examples of free markets.
Well, do you ever ask yourself why?
Because people like power.
Because it's theory. It may work in theory. It would never work in reality.
No, the issue is there aren't free markets because of the fact that, corporations pay good money for lobbyists so that there aren't free markets. The barrier to entry is created by corporate entities. I mean, this is not brain surgery here.
How does a free market rid us from corporations in their pursuit of more market power?
One more time.
How does a free market rid us of corporate interests pursuing more market power?
It's really simple, through competition.
Again, let's take an industry like the steel industry. It's not as simple to create a steel company. It takes an awful lot of capital. And there are a number of barriers to entry to get into that kind of business. And not anybody can just do it. So
yeah, and the government adds to that. The government adds to that in order to make the barrier to entry a little bit higher, and they have good reason to. They're being paid to do it. I mean,
but I think
now, granted, they're being paid through money to their elections and to their campaigns, but I mean, it's still, it is what it is.
Yeah, but you're acting like government regulation is the only barrier to entry, and I'm trying to tell you that capital is a much bigger barrier to entry to something that's capital intensive, like making steel. It's not the government regulation that's creating the biggest barrier to entry into those industries.
It all adds up, and once you add more government issues on top of it, I mean, what you're saying is correct. There are barriers to entry. However, if you add on top of that, you're essentially going to kiss your businesses goodbye and wish them to go to, I don't know, say India or China.
Yeah. What about automobiles? I don't remember the last time that we've seen a new automobile company in the United States. It's basically been the big three, and they've introduced new brands, Saturn and Geo and such, but those have always grown out of existing companies. Whereas we can look at Mitsubishi or Daewoo, or a lot of them that have grown from electronics companies. It's not that somebody just has to leap into the automobile industry. A company establishes itself in one area and grows from there.
But again, an industry that requires a ton of capital. So, again, the thing that I keep hearing about free markets are they just spring up because if somebody's not meeting a need, somebody else will. Well, yes, in theory that's true.
It doesn't have to be a completely fresh company. It could be an existing company with a lot of capital looking to expand into other markets.
Right, but the competition isn't going to just, again, you seem like the only barrier of entry that you want to talk about is regulation. When in any economic class will tell you that there's much more than that to create issues in trying to enter. You have to talk about the advantage of the first mover, somebody that that creates something first and gets to market first has an advantage over its competition. I mean,
of course. But if they're polluting the rivers and overcharging their customers, then the market is ripe for competition.
Markets generally tend to deal with bad actors in the market.
Well, let me throw out a little just scenario for you guys, and I'm going to have each of you talk about this for a second. And I'm going to go back to the example I used earlier. Just during the Industrial Revolution, we really didn't even think about pollution or any of that kind of stuff. That wasn't even an issue at the time. It wasn't that it wasn't happening. It's just that it wasn't addressed. People weren't aware of it. They weren't concerned about it. They didn't realize that, it was causing deaths in the community when people were dumping things in the river. When they were first starting up steel mills and things like that, again, they didn't know. Some of the first power producing facilities were also dumping their waste in different facilities, water facilities, polluting different crops, all kinds of stuff. We didn't realize it, right? So let's say you take the population of today that has the knowledge that it has, or at least the relative knowledge about pollution and environmentalism, whether it's good or bad, either way. Put them back in the Industrial Revolution, okay? And let's say that there's 5 companies, and all of them are doing exactly the same thing. They're dumping their stuff in the rivers. There's, it's the cheapest way to do it. There's no way around that. There's no good alternatives at that point, and there's certainly no EPA or anything like that to try and regulate, as Nick has suggested, is a good thing, okay? So now you've got 5 companies that are all doing everything they can, fighting tooth and nail to be competitive. But let's say that we have a population of today's people in that society, and they don't want these guys to, pollute anymore, and they want their products to be cheaper. Well, how does the market deal with that when you have a significant investment in these companies, and you've got a crowd of people that want somebody else to come up with something else? But to do that, they're going to have to spend a lot more money to find different ways to not pollute, etc.
Right. Well, and John, you can even flip that around. Instead of pushing people back, you can use a common economic, you can use a common industry right now and say, if you think back to the Industrial Revolution and into the turn of the 19th century to the 20th century, there were things like child labor. Kids were going to work in factories, and they're 8, 9, 10 years old working in factories. Well, we have laws in this country that prevent that now, but you see companies go overseas, especially clothing manufacturers or shoe manufacturers, go overseas and produce their products overseas, and in countries that do not have laws against child labor. And you could see right now that the stuff that's on the shelves at Target and Walmart, and getting a pair of shoes for $20 or a T-shirt for $10 is the product of having that really cheap labor, where there are no protections for that community. There is no outcry for people in America to make that right over there because I want my $10 T-shirt or I want my $20 pair of shoes. So you can look at that now. We have protections here in this country, and it's by regulation that 10-year-olds don't go to work in factories. But there are other countries that don't have those regulations, and that's what provides us our cheap clothes.
You're accepting the premise, though, that everybody thinks that child labor is bad.
Well, yes, I am accepting that premise because a 10-year-old going to work is not, they should be in school and learning and not at a factory and working.
Okay, but it's not an either-or world.
Sure it is.
Well, no,
it's not.
No. Well,
sure it is.
Countries that want to go over and have children working, it's not that they're pulling them out of school to work.
No, those families need the money, so they put their kids to work instead of having them go to school.
Exactly.
The child doesn't have a choice.
Wouldn't you rather have them survive, or wouldn't you rather have them working, for a large sum of money, which
A large sum of money?
Yes, they're generally getting paid
Yeah.
much larger sums of money than any other company over there would pay them. And would you rather have them?
You guys are making
being
my
paid
point for me.
a larger sum of money, or would you rather have them go to prostitution, which is generally another option?
Now, guys, I do have to stick my toe in the pool here and say I don't think it's an either or. Work in the shoe factory or become a prostitute. So there's probably some more shades in there than that.
No, but I would say work in a factory or live in poverty.
They
Not
work in a
necessarily-
factory and live in poverty. You guys seem to think that because they have a job, they're not in poverty. They're living in poverty while they work in a factory for minimal wages.
I would
But
say
it's
they're definitely
not
better off.
poverty. It's not poverty in their country.
Oh my God! Yeah.
It,
I don't even know. I don't even know.
you
how to
are
address
going
that.
with the standards that we have over here, and you can't judge the entire world by these same standards.
I can judge, and I feel pretty righteous in doing so to say that sending
That's my point. Yeah.
a 7 or 8 year old person to a factory instead of them learning and going to school or having a safe environment for them to play and grow up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's take
I think
away their
that's
job.
an
No,
option.
Let's take
hey,
away their
Paul,
family's income.
Hey, listen, I can sit here and I can say that that kind of poverty is not okay. And I don't have for 1 minute sit here and think that, oh my gosh, the free market's going to solve their problem. The only way that they're going to be lifted up from their current situation isn't by less regulation, it's more.
They're under more regulations. I mean, generally in most of these places, one of the big problems is that they can't create free markets. They have to have free markets transplanted, actually not even free markets. They have to have a market of some sort transplanted into their country. I mean, it's not at all that they have too little regulation.
Well, Paul, let me ask this, and this might be kind of what Nick is saying is kind of when he said you guys are making his point, and I'm not saying that's necessarily true, but the question is, let's again step back in time in the United States, and let's say we had a bunch of factories over here doing whatever, making chairs in a log factory, whatever. If there were no regulations to say that we can't have kids in the factories, and we've got people that are relatively poor. I mean, they're new to the country or whatever, immigrants, etc. Why wouldn't you put your kids to work instead of sending them to the little one-room schoolhouse? Why do we have these laws now that say that we can't have kids working here? Forget about the other countries. Let's ignore them for a second. Why do we have them now?
I agree. Why do we?
Well, I'm asking you, and if you don't think we should, then I'd like to hear why.
Well, that is my point. I don't think that we should because, one of the biggest casualties to child labor laws and various other labor laws is kids that may have otherwise got a chance to work with their parents at their business or whatever. Now, of course, there are exceptions for that, but it's when a government comes in and makes a big sweeping mandate that says you cannot do this, they affect everyone.
Yes,
I think that's
a
probably
good
the
thing.
point.
That is a perfect point.
Yeah, well, they affect everyone except the politically connected, of course. I mean, if you own a newspaper and you're trying to keep up your revenue source, and you want to do that, you might say to a senator or congressman, well, relax these rules, we'll be light on you. They're exempted.
What are you talking about, paper boys?
Exactly. Family farms were exempted. That's changing now. There were a lot of things that were exempted, but there were They basically picked what they wanted, and the fact is, you cannot globally make a decision about everyone in a country of our size, or generally of any size. You can't globally make a decision about everyone and have it perfectly fit.
Who needs? I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for what's
well, clearly
right.
not.
Well, but
let me give an
the free market's not perfect, so
it's better than government intervention.
I don't agree.
Well, I know you don't. I mean, you like government intervention, but
Paul, let me give
it just doesn't produce good results.
Paul, let me
free
give
markets don't either all the time.
Let me give an example, guys. Hold on. I'm going to give an example, and this is out of context, Paul, but this is my answer to your sweeping government statement, right? So I'm going to throw in slavery just as an example to say that's something that a lot of people would believe is very appropriate for the government to say is not acceptable. But
I agree.
I'm asking you, I mean, based on your previous statement, though, you said the government should not make sweeping statements, so maybe some states should allow slavery and some shouldn't. I mean, do you think that would be acceptable?
Well, we're talking about liberty here. We're talking about life, and that's different. I mean, the government has a mandate for one thing, to protect its citizens' life, liberty, and property. That's the only government mandate that exists.
Okay, and I think Nick might argue that preventing kids from working in child labor camps would be a protection of their life.
Yes.
Happiness, etc.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a stretch.
No, it's not a stretch. It's pretty easy.
Okay.
It's a stretch.
No, I think that's a stretch. If you assume that the kids would be in school and learning and making something of themselves, if they weren't in the factories, then yeah, it seems like a pretty clear choice. They should be in school. But I think you're overlooking that it's at home, working the family farm, doing whatever, sitting around in poverty versus making money, helping to provide for the family and whatnot. I don't know. I mean, I don't see that as akin to slavery or anything like that. I mean, what else would the kids be doing if they weren't in voluntary jobs?
You pretend like they're voluntary when they're not. When they're
they don't drag the kids out of the homes.
Well, I could tell you that
train them up on the factory line.
I'm sure that the parents would put an awful lot of pressure on their kids to go to the factory, if it's going to put a few extra dollars in their pocket.
Parents put pressure on their kids to go to Harvard. It doesn't equate to slavery.
But again, it doesn't.
Well, it might.
Right.
What was that last part, Nick? Sorry.
I said it doesn't make it right, and we throw out a little straw man here and there, and we pretend like it's okay for us to say, well, parents put pressure on their kids all the time. You know what? A 10-year-old going to work at a factory job where they can get hurt and really not have their own choice about it. I mean, we're talking about 10-year-olds. We don't allow them to drive cars.
I mean,
statistically speaking.
You don't think much of parents, do you? What parent is going to send their 10-year-old kid off to a factory with all kinds of crushing machinery and fires and lack of safety measures and all that?
Yeah, go back.
Well, it happened in go back 150 years, and you'd find that there were plenty of people that did that.
Most of them.
Well, statistically speaking, and you guys poo-pooed this what I said earlier, but it is a fact. Statistically speaking, a lot of these people in these countries that we're talking about, the options are prostitution, go work.
I think
that's not okay.
Oversimplification, but
it's not okay. It's not okay at all. But I mean, they're going with their best option. This is their best option. If you take that option away, they have worse options.
We can aspire to be so much more than that, Paul, and you could see that here in this country.
That's the point. That's the point. We're giving them more options.
So we shut down the factory. What's the kid going to do? He's going to sit at home and work the land. His parents are going to force him to fix up the house. And plow the fields and whatnot.
Hey guys, I mean, you look at this country today and the standard of living that it has, it's not just because of free markets. It's because we've made the right choices as a community to make sure that those markets are regulated appropriately. I could sit here and I could tell you for, I'll point out other the Securities Acts of 1933 and 1934, which regulates what companies have to disclose to its investors and to the public in general. Those things are regulations that provide for better, more stable financial markets.
So how is it that
so that when you have a company that wants to be publicly traded and sell stock, and it allows investors to know what those companies' financials are. It regulates how they report their accounting. It regulates when they have to report it. It regulates how they register securities, and the amount of information that goes along with that. And the creation of the SEC allows for a more stable financial market. It allows for more people to invest it. People like me or you guys, if you didn't have that kind of information, putting your money into an investment of a business means that you're at the mercy of those people being ethical. And if you think that the free market's going to ensure their ethics, I can assure you that you are wrong.
So what you're describing to me is a market demand. The demand being for assurance that companies are ethical.
That they report that they have reporting and whatnot. Yes.
So there is a market demand for that. If in a free market, if the government were not there, the market would provide the product.
I'm saying that companies would not make those. I'm saying companies would not make those declarations unless they were forced to do so.
Someone would start up a new company that had these sorts of standards. Other companies would voluntarily report everything to this centralized company. They would register, they get a seal of approval, whatnot. This is how the American Dental Association operates. This is how Underwriters Laboratories operates. I mean, the private industry provides opportunities for that sort of regulation, quote unquote, for assurances of quality, of safety, etc. If there is a market demand for safety, if there's a market demand for assurance, the market will provide it.
I highly disagree with that. The market will provide whatever is going to be the most value to those shareholders, and it will treat the shareholders with the most money differently than the shareholders with the least amount of money.
That's going to be the case always. I mean, there's no difference now.
Well, yeah. So will government.
Sure, there is. I mean, I'm required, as I work for a publicly traded company, we are required to provide the right kind of information to all of our shareholders at the same time.
And if a company started treating other shareholders differently, then people would invest their money elsewhere. I mean, you have to carry it out to the response. It's not just a black and white. It's not a two-step process. All of this, the corporations, the consumers, the vendors, all down the chain of manufacturing a product or a service. The people will respond. They will respond positively to assurances that their money is going to good causes or that their money is secure. And people will respond negatively when they feel that they're being cheated and lied to.
But what if they don't know?
Yeah, they're not going to know, and they might find out too late. What happens if that you put the trust in the wrong place and your entire savings are wiped out?
The market responds. That's why we have star ratings on Amazon. That's why we have feedback on eBay. That's why we have Consumer Reports.
What happens now?
That's why we have product recalls and
Nick, what happens now? I mean, seriously, what happens now? If somebody, like, I don't know, maybe we'll make up a name, maybe Bernie Madoff, does something really nasty, takes a lot of people's money, what happens now?
Clearly, Paul, that there are, and again, thank you for making my point. You think that there would be fewer Bernie Madoffs if we would have free markets?
No. There would not be fewer Bernie Madoffs. However, no, there would not.
Sure, there would.
However, what there would be is there would be a lot more attentive consumers.
No.
Because people would not have this false sense of security thinking, oh, the government's taking care of me. I can invest here. Nothing bad's going to happen.
No.
All right, guys. I think we've hit a nice wall. So because I know none of you guys are going to convince each other either way, this whole conversation was mostly for you guys in the audience to kind of give you guys different perspectives on this side of the argument. And I was playing a little bit towards Nick to give him a little bit of extra help there, but since it seemed like you were getting ganged up a bit, but I'm gonna cut you guys off for now. We'll probably revisit this topic in the future since it seems to be a pretty good hot button for you. I'm gonna call it a night for now, and thanks guys for your time again, and audience, thanks for tuning in to yet another episode of the Political Soup Podcast. Now again, I'm John Toll, the moderator, and our guys Dana, Nick, and Paul providing the entertainment for your fun this evening.
Right.
So again, thanks guys for your time. We'll catch you later.
Thanks.
Right.
Good day.